the dyeing, the printing, and different surface design techniques as a way of making a more sustainable but more interesting cultural textile. And so at that time, I had this aha moment shopping in a pound store, a dollar store, and I saw all of these materials that were mass manufactured, and it really put things into perspective. Around resources, all of these materials and resources that were produced so cheaply, and then I saw the rack of hosiery and recognized that this was a big design flaw. Petrochemicals being used to manufacture a disposable textile, but it wasn't disposable. You know, it's something that you would wear either single use or it would tear as you would put it on. So that became the basis for what initiated my interest in working with pre-consumer waste hosiery. So I spent 20 years, which began as a student project, 20 years of research working with waste hosiery from mills in Canada and the United States. And so through that experimentation, I created my own design studio, design label, producing new materials, a fashion line, accessories. But then that led to other materials and processes that reimagined not just this particular material waste resource, but also reimagined the tools and the machinery that was used in the transformation of this waste resource.
And this is now the basis of your PhD that you're starting.
Absolutely. And so through all of this very practice-led, research, I'm now at a stage that I discovered that through that system, I had to develop a design system as well as a business model that reflected all the materials and tools and resources and the labor that went into the reimagination of this waste resource. So it was actually during my master's degree that I came up with this taking the word MEND, which broken down stands for method, evaluate, navigate, and design. So it's a design tool for working with waste, but it's also a reflective design tool for any project that I initiate. And so through my PhD research, which is a focus on upcycling and material activism, I'm exploring the use of obsolete machinery with some digital processes to reimagine UK manufacturing waste, still specifically with waste hosiery, but it's a completely different material composition, so there will be an interesting departure as to what my outcomes will be, but it's really about furthering the use of MEND and how it can be shared and utilized by future designers ultimately. So that's part of the goal is really giving others agency to the system that I've sort of been focusing on, working with this one material resource, but it has the potential to be used in other areas of design education.
So it sounds like a very worthy PhD study actually, because it could have a legacy of sharing what you've learned the hard way.
Well said, yes, because and I still think I only scratched the surface, because I focused on a very niche part of the industry and working with one particular type of waste stream. There's so many different waste streams, pre and post, that are still needing to be engaged with. And when we think about localism and bringing agency to materials that already exist, which is at the heart of what I do, I really believe we need to be working with existing materials rather than manufacturing new materials. It's really about resource preservation, and I think that's also one of my main motivations. It's resource preservation, but it's also the preservation of craft. That's a huge part of what still informs and keeps me excited, because there's so many different ways of how we understand what craft is and where it exists, and particularly with technology. There's so many different forms of technology, and there's so many arguments as to what technology is, and I think there's a lot of untapped knowledge into existing machines and tools of the past that could give breathe new life into existing systems that are a dead end. So I choose to kind of reverse engineer the use of some materials and processes to kind of find new openings and new ways of approaching materials and processes. Yes.
Well, look forward to hearing the outcome of your PhD when you finish it.
Yeah,
but
thanks.
in the meantime, how does this reflect in your own wardrobe? Can you tell us a little bit about how you select and use and transform clothes personally?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unfolding for me. To really kind of summarize, I've always been very eclectic in how I dress, and I like to collage things together. And I mean, even when I think about how I approach design and processes, it's very much a collage process. And so I'm very much, interested in bringing in pieces of that are part of my own personal journey. So they could be pieces that I've collected over the years. I love vintage textiles. I love the story and the narratives that they carry from different cultures, but remixing that with some of the upcycled materials that I've created in the studio. And so it's all about layering, and I'm a bit of a chameleon. I dress depending on my mood. I know I'm in very much a grayscale palette today. It's not a reflection, it's more a reflection of the weather more than anything. But when it comes to self-expression, what I still tap into, even as a young child, it's this space where this is how I'm going to present myself for today. This is my mood and my personality and my feeling. But I can't tell you from day to day, it's never the same. And so, but when it comes to, I like to play with, I like to wear things inside out and backwards depending on, how I'm feeling that day. So I always take a sense of play and curiosity when it comes to how I'm dressing and how I'm mixing things. And some days I might look really classic, and then other days I might look like a woman that stepped out of the 1940s. So I love the idea of that clothing has this ability to empower what I'm feeling inside in ways that I don't necessarily want to always verbalize. So it's a powerful tool for me to kind of just experiment. And I think through that, it does inform how I design. Because being a woman that's curvy, I'm very, I don't want to say sensitive, but I'm definitely empathetic to the way clothing needs to fit, needs to move. And I also just believe that clothing, it is this instrument, and it's a tool for communication. And so I always try to think about that. And I do reflect upon that in how I approach designing it. Absolutely.
So you do have design skills and skills of sewing. How does this reflect within a culture where most people just buy fast fashion? What's the limitation of that?
It's a good question. I mean, I think because I approach things from designing the material first, and that's sort of the driving force. So I get to figure things out when it comes to the output of what the outcome is from the materials that I design. I'm never looking at what's going on in fast fashion, because that's never who my audience has been and why I design. Because I'm not a consumer of fast fashion, but in the age of fast fashion, it's so important for designers like myself to create our own space and maintain that space, because there's a lack of balance clearly that exists as a result of mass manufacturing in fashion, and there's definitely an audience, and there's definitely a community that supports designers like myself. It's growing.
What are
more
people
so.
What are people looking for? That flexibility and that ability to express, and or what? What?
Well, I'll say I had this one question posed to me once, and they're like, "How much Katherine Soucie, how much sans souci do you want in the world?" And my answer is like, I mean, even if I scratch the surface of even 1%, that's enough. I think if one person has a piece that's special to them that I've done, and I do have clients that collect from every collection I produce, so there are some collectors out there, but really my work is designed to complement your lifestyle and everything else in your wardrobe. I don't design for people to buy from every collection. I want dispersion, to create a balance in who consumes, and also to reflect. I can only produce so much, and I have always only wanted to produce so much. So I do have a responsibility as to what I put out there, and I made that oath in 1997 when I was visiting a landfill and seeing the vast amounts of waste in our environment. And I thought, if I'm going to be a designer in this world, I have a responsibility as to what I put out there.
Can we just get back to your own wardrobe and how is everything you've made, or do you buy things, or do you thrift, or what?
Yes. I mean, I'm fortunate that I got turned on to thrifting in the 80s, visiting an older sister in Montreal, where, I mean, there were massive, like 4 thrift stores, because a lot of them were sort of facilitators, because there used to be a significant manufacturing in Montreal, so all the seconds used to come in, and so Polo, Ralph Lauren, Esprit, all these big name brands were being, now they would be sold off to somewhere or burned, depending on the company, fortunately. But I got exposed to where that there was new things, not just old clothing, in secondhand stores. And so when it was taboo growing up in my small town in southern Ontario to go in there, I would actually skip school and go in and visit and do my shopping. And so I've never lost that. I mean, every city that I go to, whenever I'm traveling, there's 2 things I do. I check out the charity shops and the local grocery stores. And because to me, I like, there's a sense of, you really experience what a culture's like by what they discard. My closet's filled with so many secondhand clothing. It's mixed with half my clothing that I've made, and even things that I've made, I've often redesigned over time, just because there was something I wanted to change about it. And that's the one thing that's nice about design, is what worked for you previously, then you realize, oh, this wasn't maybe the best approach to designing this detail, and so it makes you reflect upon how to design better. And that's what I've done, and I've really pushed what I've done with my own clothing and used it in ways that, and in environments, for example, that I wouldn't normally wear them in, to see how they would wear over time.
Does it give you a sense of well-being, being able to evolve your clothes to suit your needs? You talk about health and well-being in connection to your wardrobe.
Absolutely. I mean, because of my mixed heritage and being in Canada, I mean, I really questioned what Canadian culture was, and because clothing became this vehicle for me to identify with myself and who I was, that really gave me a sense of self, and how I could use fashion as this vehicle for getting to know myself better. And I was at a young age, when I understood this. And I also understood the power of color. I remember having this mustard United Colors of Benetton sweatshirt, this jumper, and how powerful I felt in wearing this color. And I was like, wow, I didn't know wearing a certain color could make me feel this way. So when I connected with that, and when I understood, as I understood how to sew and design, I still reflect upon that, because color and pattern and not just silhouette are so important in being able to animates our clothing and what we bring to it. So when we connect with a certain color and we wear it, you know, and you get stopped in the street and someone says, wow, you look really nice today, you know, or gives you some kind of compliment, you recognize how, you know, what you are feeling inside, someone else is, you know, recognizing that from the external, right? And so it's I mean, for me, it's one thing that it creates a sense of well-being and connection with the self, but when other people recognize it when you're wearing something, that's just as equally I want to say powerful when it comes to our understanding our own relationship to clothing and in the well-being sense, because ultimately it's so important to have a good relationship with ourselves, but it's also just as equally important when others see that within ourselves. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And I think that's also why, you know, the relationships that I've built with my clients over the years and the stories that they've shared and what they've embodied as a result, and it's been life-shifting for some people. For example, I had this one client say that she was recently had been a widow. She had dated in over 40 years. She saw one of my dresses in the shop, tried it on. She thought, okay, I'm going to wear this on my first date in over 40 years. I got this long email. I had never met her, and her explaining how the first thing her date said was like, wow, what an amazing color, what an amazing dress on you. And it opened up the conversation immediately, and it gave her a sense of confidence in knowing that she understood how she felt in wearing it, but this new person in her life saw that. And so it's those kind of responses that I've had from clients over the years, among many, many others, that have really shifted my understanding that the powerful tool that clothing has as a form of well-being and connection, you know. And then through that, you know, when you have those compliments when you wear something, even though it's an external compliment, it makes you recognize the power, like how we can better our relationship with our clothing and how we can use, you know, you want to wear it more if it makes you feel good. And there's so many clothing out there that does not make ourselves feel good, and we know that. If you go into any fast fashion retailer, if you put something on, it's not going to feel like you, right?
How important do you feel it is to be able to tweak and alter yourself? Like, you can't always run off and get someone else to do it, can you? Or are skills useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, that's the one area some people fear, you know, the fear of the cut, altering something, not doing it right, you know, it's, so there's some people that I've met that have no problem experimenting and playing and releasing their connection to what it looks like in the present moment, and they're afraid to transform it. Where some people, and have very little skills, they just decide, I'm just going to experiment with this. Then there's some people that, you know, may need to obviously go to somebody to help them redesign that if they have a bigger idea that's beyond their skills. But I mean, I don't think you need to have a ton of skills to reimagine something that exists in your closet. Sometimes it's just a matter of wearing it differently than you've currently existed, or pairing it with something that you haven't worn with it before, because some people have these notions that, you know, a certain color needs to be worn with a certain color, and then that's it, and so it's limited, and so I think there's a lot of ways of being able to experiment with existing styles, you know. I mean, I think one of the best examples, and I was taught by an old colleague years ago from Italy, who would wear all her button-down cardigans or jumpers backwards. So to see the buttons coming down the back, I just thought, like, just how elegant it looked. Sometimes wearing something different in the wrong way can really change the experience of that garment. But if you want to literally transform it, I think there's such an amazing resource that's proliferating all of social media when it comes to upcycling, that it can make it, there's more ways of making that engagement process a lot more accessible. And I think you don't have to be a designer with so-called skills to reimagine a piece of clothing.
So if we're playing in our wardrobes more and becoming attached and holding on to what we've got, is that a way to help reduce textile waste, do you feel?
Well, 100%. I mean, I think that if we can be looking at what's existing in our own closet and reimagining it, either for ourselves or maybe another family member, or maybe you want to use it for a project as a gift. There's many ways. I think we should all be looking at what's in our existing supply chain to work with. And again, if you need some help to work with that, I mean, there's different ways of engaging and inviting that in. But ultimately, what we have existing in our closets and in our own homes are the best way to look at our own supply chain first and foremost, before looking elsewhere, even at a charity shop or any other resources. I just think it's important.
So can you just speak a little of the mental health benefits and how your mental health is assisted by your approach to your wardrobe?
Well, I think I need to start with what it means to be working with your hands when it comes to making textiles, because I speak to that first, because there's something about working with your hands that allows for you to develop insights and solutions to existing problems that you might be experiencing. And there's something about that, kinetic process. It allowed for me to grow in ways and understand not just the intelligence of the materials that I'm working with, but it helped inform my own emotional intelligence around whatever I was experiencing at the time. And so through that process of working with discarded materials, we'll say, it really strengthened and empowered my own voice, because I was always quite shy, but I had to learn. I mean, these materials have given me the opportunity to really bring voice to various different issues, and I'm equally passionate about working with craft and waste materials and the environment. And so it's through that I had to break that down for me to have a better understanding of my relationship with clothing, because even though I always used it as a vehicle for cultural expression and understanding who I was, breaking down the material allowed for me to really decolonize my ideas around certain silhouettes and structures and how I was using it. So it became my understanding and my knowledge of how to produce a garment is way more amplified, because I understand materials that much more, and how to tap into the general well-being of the garment, and I'm speaking about designing the life cycle of that material and garment. I mean, they're one of the same, but at the same time, if you don't really have a really grounded understanding of the materials, it's very difficult to understand what the life cycle of the garments that you're wearing or designing for. So it's so, I mean, well-being has been so forgotten when it comes to the making of clothing, and I think when it comes to designing for the future, I mean, we do need a more mindful approach to how we design and care for our clothing.